classic snowbird, right? I've been following this pattern for about 4 or 5 years. You know, 6 or so months up in the mountains of Colorado, the winters in at our permanent home in Scottsdale. Um, and when I'm here, it's either Oak Creek in Sedona, um, or there's a fishery in the Salt River, but it's within 45 minutes of the 5 million people who are in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and it's wrecked, right? There's
Yeah.
just you can fish it shortly after it gets stocked and have some success, but it's just such a heavily used fishery. So I've been out there a couple times this winter, and my son and I have gone out, and he had some luck. I didn't do any good, but it's really I turn on the fishing thing again when I get to the cabin. So
Nice.
Have you been to the new fly shop in Arizona? The AZ Fly Shop?
no, what's it called?
AZ Fly Shop. It's over on Cactus at 51. Oh,
It's not too far.
It's actually it's like a nice fly shop you would have up in the mountains. Chris Rich is really doing a good job there. So you need to check that out before you head out. But I mean, it's just like you're in the mountains, you go to a fly shop, except when you're in Phoenix with 6 million people who don't fish.
Right.
Yeah. In
It's
the
a
middle
nice
of a
shop.
desert where it's hard to find water. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is pretty unique, actually. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've heard of the Salt River. Somebody told me I should go try that because I have some family down in Arizona I visit once in a while. And somebody mentioned that to me. What was the name of the first river you mentioned, and what kind of
Creek.
fish are in there?
That's Oak Creek in Sedona.
Oak Creek, yeah, it runs through Oak Creek Canyon, sort of as the Mogollon Rim sort of cuts away from kind of the Flagstaff area and comes through Oak Creek and through Sedona, and eventually meets up with the Verde River, I think around Camp Verde in Arizona. And there's brown and rainbow. There's I'm not sure if there's any. I think there's maybe not the Gila
Mm-hmm.
trout, but
Yeah, they
maybe
are.
so.
There are a few
There
in
are.
there. They are putting them in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the Apache trout too? Or are they?
No, I don't think they
No,
stock the Apache
they're not
in
in that
Oak
area?
Creek.
Okay.
There are Apaches in this state, but they're not in. I don't think they stock them in Oak Creek. I haven't seen anybody do that yet. Catch one of those there,
Gotcha.
but they are there.
Now, when you come up to Colorado, David, your cabin is on or near the Pooter. Is that right?
Yeah, it's on. It's not right on the river, but it's about a 30-second walk.
Nice.
That sounds rough.
Yeah.
Past my uncle's cabin, who happens to have sort of the Taj Mahal on the Pooter. He's got a beautiful cabin with a deck that's really right on the water. It's
Oh, that's cool.
it's very nice. And we just have the next property up towards the road, and then I have a cousin who has another property even closer to the road. So we've kind of got a
Wow.
nice little compound there. Yeah.
Family affair.
No kidding.
Yeah,
But there
it's
must be
nice.
room for all 6 of us to come visit then, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of work to do the first couple of weeks of April, so I'm expecting all of you there.
No, we'll be there.
Yeah.
Bring the
Yeah,
chainsaws.
be careful. Be careful.
We'll earn our keep.
I don't know if I can bring a chainsaw, but I'll bring the beers. How about that?
I've got
Okay, he's invited.
I've definitely got the chainsaw.
Yep.
I got a couple
There
of
you
them.
go.
Rob's our he's our logger.
And I've got climbing gear and all that.
Right on.
You got to come
Nice.
down to my property that I have, Rob. I've got like 2.5 acres that need some TLC.
Yeah, I'd be down. I love climbing. That's all I did. Shit, what Ryan for almost the whole year.
Yeah.
Back and
Nice.
forth, the hazard trees and all that.
So Dave, how long have you been fishing? How'd you get into it?
So this property in the Pooter Canyon was first settled by my great-grandfather, Eugene Clare Foote, who lived in Nebraska. And I'm not sure quite how he found this area. He was definitely a Renaissance man around the turn of the century, 19th to 20th century. He was a physician, a field physician in World War I. He was a big game hunter in Africa. He had the first commercial aviation company in Nebraska. So he was that kind of guy, super active and, global. And he found the Pooter and he bought some property up there, which is still part of a sort of a corporate holding. We called him Papa Dad, and I did meet him. He lived to be 100. Just vague recollections of Papa Dad. But he had 5 kids, and he had bequeathed plots of land to each of his 5 children, one of whom was my grandmother, that she never took ownership of and never developed. And so it's sort of been, lost in the abyss somehow. But her husband, my grandfather, who was also from Nebraska, bought property adjacent to the corporate land. And that's where the old my family cabin was. Just a summer cabin, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a fish room, no insulation, just a seasonal cabin. And where I got turned on to the Pooter and to the mountains and to fishing was really my mother. So Papa Dad was a big fisherman, but my grandfather Herb was not. My father was not. It was my mother who was sort of interested in understanding what she just loved being outdoors. She was a real conservationist and science teacher for middle school. And so as a teacher, we had, 8 weeks every summer, and that's where we went. We packed up the station wagon and we drove from Denver up the Pooter, about 2.5-hour drive. And I just remember very vividly when you get into the canyon. So from the junction of 287 and Highway 14, which runs up through the canyon, there's this historic landmark called Ted's Place. And unfortunately, years and years ago, they actually tore down the Ted's Place, which was a cool kind of inn and diner and gas station. And now it's a modern convenience store, Conoco kind of thing.
How many years ago
But
was that?
From that point, it was about an hour drive up the canyon. And if you've been in the Pooter, it's a windy road through a lot of steep rocks, the tunnel that's blown out through the rock. Just amazingly, beautiful canyon. And this road just meanders alongside the river the whole way up. And I remember so vividly, and it didn't matter where I was in the back seat, left side or right side, because, you cross 4 bridges before you get to our place. And so half the drive, if I was competing with a brother or 2 in the back seat, I'd be pressed up against a window and I would see just my forehead against the window. And all I would do is I would just stare at the water. Just as a little kid, when I hadn't really ever experienced fishing. And I would look at that water and I would say to myself, oh, there's probably a fish behind that rock. Oh, look at that shallow water. I wonder if there's fish in there. Ooh, that's really deep. It got really deep and slow. There must be big fish in there. And I was just sort of mesmerized by this water and this idea that there were living creatures in there. And so, when we spent the summers up there, we would wake up and my younger brother would grab his bow and arrow and go out into the woods early in the day. We wouldn't see him until dinner time. I was always the guy up early who would just walk down to the bend, walk down the path past my uncle's house. And I was just, throwing my Mep spinner and I was catching fish after fish. And so just sort of the love of feeling that, something on the other end of the line. But that whole connection to everything I was so captivated by as I was driving up the canyon. And then I try to find similar water. It's like, oh yeah, this is like the rock I saw, when we drove up last week. I'm going to cast behind that rock. And sure enough, it validated what I was suspecting about where fish could be. And then over time, it was my mother who decided she would be a fly fisher woman. And so, and with 2 older brothers sort of making that transition, I did as well as a young teenager. But from that point to now, seriously, below average fly fishermen. I mean, we were taught It's dry fly fishing, and there's one fly. Just tie on a Royal Coachman. It's all you need. It imitates everything. And that was sort of the gospel. There was no such thing as nymph fishing. There was no such thing as stripping streamers. Nobody knew
Still
anything about that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Gary-
a little slip in there.
Gary's
a
not
little
a big streamer
Gary's
guy.
still living in that
So,
world.
I'm
Actually.
I'm in that church with you. I believe it 100%.
Royal Coachman's
But-
a classic.
Really is.
But
Yeah.
oh yeah. But in my experience, I love fishing, but there's still no real entomology for me. There's no real science for me. I don't do a lot of studying. I now realize there's more than, oh, I thought it was moths and mosquitoes. Those are real. And so the Royal Coachman must imitate a moth or a mosquito or both in some way. And so I had really had no idea that it was, sometimes you should turn over rocks. Sometimes you should shake branches and, what's out there and try to imitate that. And so there's been a little bit of that that's creeped into my fly fishing repertoire, but not much. For me, it's just about being out on the water. I continue to be mesmerized by moving water. So that's sort of how it happened. And that's now a spot I get to go to as often as I want to, and just keep connecting to the child in me.
Awesome. I can tell you're a storyteller. I mean, I
Yep.
feel like I'm
And that's
listening
one
to
thing
your
like, I
book.
think about that all the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, tell us more about your book specifically. I really want to kind of get into that while we have you on.
Yeah.
Where was the idea? Where did it come from? Inspiration? I think we understand some of where that came from by listening to you.
Yeah, I always just enjoyed writing, and I never, had any formality to it. But I started seeing on the TU website, Trout Unlimited website, that you could submit stories. Voices from the River, I think, was the segment. And so it said, reach out to our director of digital. It was Chris Hunt. If you guys know that name from TU, I'm not sure if he's still there. And so I reached out and I said, hey, what's the deal? Can I submit stuff? And, what do you take? He goes, yeah, we can't pay you. I'm like, wow, I didn't even expect to, even entertain the thought of being paid. I just, if I throw it out there, how will they react? Will they get comments, that sort of thing? So over the course of about a year, I submitted, 6 or 7, short stories, and Chris published them. And there was some, real good feedback. There was some kind comments, and we really enjoy this, and thanks for sharing. And so I decided, look, I think I got a lot of stories, all around sort of the cabin experience. Some of my stories were, other experiences, growing up, not necessarily the cabin, but there's enough that has happened up there in my life, like ghosts,
Right.
and like my dog, and weather and fishing and the wildlife, that I felt I had a number of stories. And so I began to just put them together. And over the course of about a year and a half, I felt I had a pretty strong collection. I knew some of the stories weren't that good and were probably too short. Some of the other stories, as I was writing them, they just felt really powerful to me. And so maybe people enjoy these, like they enjoyed some of the stuff I was posting on TU. And so I became an independent author and self-published Sermons and Stones, Tales of Family, Friends, and Fly Fishing, and had some fun with the format and the layout. I wanted a quote for every story. There's 18 short stories here. I wanted to use a photo that was taken by me. It was a personal photo, and did a sort of black and white treatment to the photo inside the book. And I published it without really any expectation at all. It cost me a couple $1,000s of my own money to put this together. And boy, if I see $1 of that back, that would be cool. I don't know if anybody's going to buy this thing. And I tried to leverage a little bit of social media, tried to build a following on Insta, talked a little bit about it on Facebook, which I'm not really on anymore. And sure enough, just little by little, interest grew. And to date, I've sold probably 3,000 copies, right? It's not a bestseller. It's not going to make the New York Times list by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm like, wow, enough people liked it. And I did a little bit of trying to find, the Dave Hansons of the world, those influencers on social media,
Yeah.
and said, hey, can I send you a copy? And would you read it? And would you, talk about it a little bit? And just bit by bit, those kinds of efforts, help bring some awareness to it. But I am in the middle of working on a second book of short stories. Dave, you called out that it wasn't until you got to, it was the story called Sermons and Stones in the book. And you're like, oh, this is from a Shakespeare quote.
Right.
And so in that quote is the title for my second book of short stories. And the quote is, if you guys don't mind, and it's from the play As You Like It. And this our life, exempt from public haunt, finds tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything. And so I know, David, you had seen it. It's like, oh, spoiler alert. Yeah, that's the title of the book, Sermons and Stones. And so the next one, I'm the working title right now is Tongues in Trees.
Cool.
Off that quote.
Cool. When did your first book come out? It hasn't been out that long, has it?
It came out in November of 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, so a couple years.
When's your next one scheduled to come out? You got a date yet?
Don't have a date.
All right. Well, at least we
Still
know there's
matching
going to
it
be
together.
another one coming. Yeah, I really enjoyed the first one, and I tried to, take some pictures as you saw and quote it and post it on my stories, and
Yeah.
hopefully, like you said, just helping get the word out. That's kind of why we're here and why we wanted to bring you on, to hear more of your story and the story behind the story.
Dave, I literally just bought your book as you were describing that, so I'm looking forward to my copy showing up.
Yeah, cool. If any of you guys make it up to the cabin this summer, I'll sign your copy of the book. It makes it that much more valuable.
So that's all I
Yeah.
need is to buy a book and I'm in at your place.
Perfect.
That's what I heard. I don't know about you guys. That's what I heard. Buy the book, come to the cabin.
He's like, I'll
Yeah,
buy
I love it.
3.
Yeah.
Hey, look,
Is that 3 weeks? Is it a book a week? Is that how this works?
I figure one of you guys can teach me how to fly fish because I can help.
I'll go up with Dave
We're-
and he could do that for
say
you.
we're all.
I'll be there with Dave.
I'm still trying to learn how to fly fish. I have
Yeah,
no clue what the hell I'm doing.
We all
Yeah,
suck. Let's
The
admit it.
longer it goes, the worse you get, it seems,
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Yep. Like golf,
So,
you
Dave,
just get bad habits.
Yeah.
So, Dave, I've got just a follow-up question because it sounds like you've been visiting the Poudre River for a good portion of your life. Over the years, how has that changed? How have you seen the, your wilderness surroundings change? Have you seen anything change that, it indicates overuse, or is it still kind of that same picturesque spot that you think of?
I think it probably would be almost the same picturesque spot that I've always known if it weren't for the Cameron Peak fire, which started about 8 miles upstream and blew through our area on 2 different occasions. And as you guys know, or may not know, the biggest fire in Colorado history, which was August 13th of 2020 when that ignited. And I had just dropped off my wife and one of my kids at DIA. I was in Fort Collins. My cousin, who was at her cabin on the road, had a text from her when I stopped in Fort Collins. She says, we don't know if the road is still open. Scratching my head. And the next text was, do you see smoke? And so I looked out towards the west from Fort Collins, and sure enough, there's a plume of smoke. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wonder where that fire is. So the road wasn't closed, and I was able to drive up, but waiting in the driveway was a sheriff's deputy talking to my cousin and her husband, for lack of a better word. He's a friend with benefits for the last 20 years, not a husband. But the deputy is like, you got to evacuate. And I said, where's the fire? He says, it's about 10 miles upstream, up by Chambers Lake, but you got to get out. I said, how much time do I have? got about an hour. You got to get out within the hour. It's like, really? It's 10 miles away? He says, we have just no idea what it's going to do. It's too early. It's too unpredictable. So I thought, okay. I pulled up to the door of the house, and I threw a small cooler. I threw a few drinks in there, and I grabbed my toothbrush. I said, I'll be back tomorrow. They'll put the fire out. Naively thinking that this is a fire and somebody's campfire got out of hand, but not remembering that entire summer, like prior summers, you just knew things were drier.
Yep.
You just kind of felt the air was dry, and the moisture was being sucked out of the air. There was almost like, for the last couple of summers prior to the fire, this just slight yellow tinge in the air. You'd walk on grasses and hear it crunching. It's like, wait a minute, I've never heard that before. What's going on here? And I know from climbing in those hills and being above timberline, there was a hell of a lot of fuel. It's just all the deadfall that was on the ground. So I slept in my car for 3 nights, about 10 miles downstream, fished a little, did a little work. And it became really apparent I wasn't going to get back up there. And so I ended up contacting the Red Cross. They put me in a hotel in Fort Collins for about 9 days, 10 days. And then I decided this thing's getting bad. And I came all the way back to Scottsdale, Arizona. And we monitored the fire. So really what has changed is, look, these firefighters, it was an incredible thing for me to witness. They laid hoses from water sources. They had pumps and sprinklers. And it was clear as you monitored the fire and got the updates, the daily updates from the Fire Command Center, they weren't going to actively fight the fire. Terrain was too rugged, too dangerous. But I think there was also this unspoken strategy of it needs to burn.
Yep.
And so they were letting it burn, but they were protecting structures.
Yeah.
And so as the crews came down canyon ahead of the fire, they had set all these systems up. And all they did was just turn on pumps, came down the canyon, turned on pumps. So all the structures, I mean, it was a massive undertaking, but all these structures just had sprinklers sprinkling all around the roofs and all around. And so, long story short, when I got back up there, the cabin in our little compound is sort of this green oasis that looks, if you don't look up, to your question, it looks the same as it's always looked, this idyllic, beautiful, mountain property. But the moment you look up the slopes, you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
It is bad.
Yeah. We just went through the same thing. So I'm in Oregon. And I did firefighting for 20 years between New York and Oregon. I did everything from being on a ladder truck to wildland to all that. But we just went through our big fire. I think it was possibly the second biggest fire in the state of Oregon. And when it's combined, I think it was over 400,000 acres. That's when it was done. But it came real close to my place. Like I had family members that lost houses and all that. But yeah, I mean, when you go back up there and you're going into it, you know what it looks like, especially if it's recent. It's like, every tree and nick and like groove and everything. You go up there and it's like somebody came through and just wiped everything off planet Earth and stuff. So, but I mean, the bad thing is, I mean, not to get too political, but you being in the woods and you understanding of when I kind of chuckled when you said they need to let it burn. It's because the hands are so tied, whether it's politically or business aspect on it, of how to maintain the forest and how to be done. I mean, being in Oregon and being a logging family, and being in the logging community now, it's huge. I mean, we understand it. We understand that they need to go through and clean that up and take care of our areas. And I look at, which a lot of people look at me like, what? But I look at logging as part of conservation, because when you go in there and you clear that, the fuels on the ground, you clear all that stuff, you're taking less of an aspect of how the fire is going to react. Because when you burn all that, when you burn the trees along the freaking rivers and all that, that takes shade away from the water. That takes all that from the water, and it drops. When we had our big fire, we have lakes and ponds that we fish out of. Killed every single fish that we had. All that ash coming in there, it kills the oxygen in there because lays on the bottom and it smothers everything on the bottom of the river. And so, yeah, it's devastating. I mean, so people need to realize that it's like, it's part of the conservation out there is taking care of the land around the rivers too. That means the trees, the banks, all that, and make sure that it's safely done.
It's an amazing thing to see where forests are managed and where they're not. And stand to man, I don't know if from Prescott you get up to the Flagstaff area, but I showed my brother-in-law, we did a hike up in Flagstaff, and I said, look at this forest. He looked around like, yeah. I said, what do you notice? He's been at the Pooter. He spent a lot of time with me. I was like, what do you notice about this forest? He goes, I don't get it. What do you mean? I said, look how clean it is. Look at all the stumps. They have cleared so much timber, so much deadfall, so much fuel out of here. Now think about it as compared to what your experience has been in the Pooter. He's like, yeah, we were trying to climb that climb and we were just hopping over log after log, and there was so much, trash and thrash and slash on the forest floor. And I know Flagstaff still gets fires, but I think they're like better managed fires, and you have more control over what happens.
Absolutely, and they're safer fires, to be honest, because
Yeah.
you look at it, when you get into the clearing, and you clear that debris and you take that fuel away, and it just burns like the grass and the small ends and stuff. It's more controllable. It usually stays on the ground, and it'll move faster through the ground, so it doesn't necessarily rip into the trees and get into the canopies, because it doesn't have that stage where it's going. I mean, fires, and I'm super passionate about being a firefighter. I actually miss it. I'm kind of bummed they're retired, but I mean, 20 years was enough for me. Booking through there, I mean, it's a living thing. It's constantly trying to feed, and so if there's really nothing there to feed, it's going to try to book through there as fast as it can, and try to get to somewhere where it can feed. And that's like the difference between like yours and my fire is, dude, it was like a fat kid driving through McDonald's on like free hamburger day. I mean, it's just like there's so much fuel on the ground. It would
What
sit
day is
there
this?
and eat, and the fire would be 3 times the intensity of what it would originally be if it was properly maintained.
Dave, have
Yeah.
you been to Prescott? Have you ever been up here?
Yeah, as a guy who lives in Prescott, I'm surprised you call it Prescott, because I've been told all my life locals call it Prescott. So you're not
You're
really
not a local. You're not a local. So when I talk to non-locals, I say Prescott. When I talk to locals, it's Prescott. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So and then I do distinguish between people that know and don't know. And then, quite frankly, I've been here 4 years. I had to learn that also. But they do a lot of burns here. They're burning all over the place. We have a mountain in town. It's called Thumb Butte. There's a SWAT, probably looks like a football field. You can imagine it's just right across it. They went and cleared it out, threw 20 piles along the side of the hill and burned all the piles. And it was amazing. I could watch it. It was one guy who was controlling the 20 piles. And I was like, holy cow, if that gets away, he's in trouble. Then I was able to go somewhere during the day, went around the mountain on the other side, and there was another 20 guys clearing. So he was just managing.
Yeah.
But Arizona is really good. If you go up to the Grand Canyon, you'll see the same thing. They clear out all the bottoms, take all that brush, pile it up, and then they'll wait for a nice cool day with maybe rain in the forecast, and they'll burn them. So Arizona does a tremendous job. My sister lives in Santa Rosa. She lost her house in one of those California fires.
Wow.
And again, that was
sorry.
unmanaged forest, like Rob is saying. And it got away from them. And it just, well, you guys know, they had 2 or 3 years of fires out there.
Yeah.
So it's a serious and sad thing. But they were able to save your house, your property, and everything, huh? That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's the blessing. The curse was the fire crew, as they were mopping up, watched a bear break into a window in the cabin. They apparently can't do anything about it, right? It's private property. They're not going to go after a bear who's probably distressed and agitated and smells all the food in the house because the power was shut down, and the ice cream and the casseroles and it's stinking to high heaven. They went up the road and told a friend who had not evacuated. He runs a cabin rentals place, and he was providing showers to the fire crews, et cetera. And he came down with his shotgun and his camera, and the bear was gone. He took some pictures for me, and I was down in Arizona by that time. And he said, I'll come back in the morning and board it up. Well, the bear came back that night, He came back the morning, there was more damage. He boarded it up. He came back the next day, the bear had broken through a second window. And by the time I got there, which was late October, my place was completely trashed. I mean, there was bear shit in the, in the living room. The refrigerator was completely.
Sounds like a frat party that went bad.
Ripped off. There was an imprint on the bench seat in the bay window where it was clear he was sitting down eating a pint of chocolate chip mint ice cream, I think it was, just enjoying the view. The Park Service guys were contacted. They set up a live trap and they got him. And, I feel badly because the bear had scratched some other cabins and they ultimately euthanized. And so now the bear lives 2 miles up at Andy's place in his store. He's got a nice mount of the bear that broke into my cabin.
Nice. And it kind of sucks on that too, because I mean, in all that little guy's trying to do is just survive. Everything that he had is gone. I mean, there's no food source because that pushes everything out. I mean, other than them freaking finding that's if he can get away. I mean, it's like that's what we ran into too. I mean, there's so many times we were up during our fire when we would go up even afterwards. Bears come down, like you see their ass end all frayed and all the hair burned off of them, but they're just looking for food and stuff. So it kind of sucks, but
it does kind of suck. I felt badly for him, but I get to visit him now.
Hey, I mean, at least you got some good meals.
You walk up to who got it in the end? Who for that bear? The ice cream kills, baby.
He got some good meals before the end, so he's good.
Yeah. I thought I was listening to Goldilocks there for a little while, sitting down eating his porridge. This one's too hot.
So what's the fishing like before then and then now? I mean, is the structure of, because I know, because we're about a year behind you. Our big fire was the year after. Was in 2021. No shit, it might have been the same shortly after yours, because ours was it 22? Ours was 20. Ours was September Memorial Weekend, or
2020.
I think ours was Memorial Weekend of 2020. I remember I think our timelines were really close. That's when like the whole West Coast was just burning. I mean, California was burning, you guys were burning, we were burning. What's the fishing like now? Are you running into any terrain that's like unstable? Like kind of like areas that like I'm at, where they've kind of not necessarily redirected the river, but there's been lots of slides now. A lot of the shade's not there in some areas. Has it affected the way the fishing has been?
So I'm really amazed by how resilient the river is, by how resilient Mother Nature is. There are certainly a lot of ash. The river was choked, I think, in last year's runoff. I was there. There was as the trees are coming down the river, which they do every year with the water rising. They just were black trees instead of brown trees. And the river has actually, and the fishing has actually been okay. It hasn't been markedly different than in the past. I haven't seen as many big fish. Don't know what that means. What is really the risk now is the slopes and the rains. And last summer, late July, about 8 miles downstream from us, there's a little community, 9 homes, 9 cabins or so, right on the river. God, the name's escaping me. But they were in a gulch, and there was a heavy rain high up over the ridge. This thing apparently, picked up as it came down slopes and picked up material, and then there was a sort of a clog, and then it kept bringing behind the clog, and then the clog burst and then went to the next clog. And by the end of the day, this thing unleashed a torrent, and it ripped 5 houses off of the bank of the river into the river and clogged the river. There were 4 people in one of those homes,
Holy
and
smokes.
all 4 of them died. They didn't find the 4th body until months later. It was really horrific. Within a week, we had another very strong rainstorm on the slope of Boston Peak, which is just where our property is. And I had a little bit of flooding in our area, in our yard, but the places across the road essentially became, as the channel was carved into a new channel, it was carved right into the backside of a neighbor's home.
Oh no.
And so they had terrific flooding. So that's really the sort of the longer term impacts of this fire. I think we're going to see more and more. How do we mitigate and manage,
Yeah.
the slopes? And it's the stuff you hear about in California all the time. But for me, it was brand new. Like, what the hell's going on? I mean, this thing doesn't stop with the Yahoo who we think started the fire. This goes on for years and years and years. But thankfully, you've got little patches of green. You've got a resilient, a planet that's trying to be resilient. And the river itself has, I think, done a remarkable job of recovering from the impacts.
And I think that, and because we're going through that right now, it's like our fire. It was pretty unique on like how it moves, how it. You look at it like, why did it go around this zone and not this zone, and how it moves? But coming back and being there like the day after everything burned up here, and we were allowed to, and we were going up and helping doing, like linking up with the personnel and just really being heavily involved with the local fire here, and then going up with my wife like 6 months later, and you start to see that green where there was nothing. I mean, it's kind of like being in the snow, and people that understand, and guys that are listening that might not understand, when you're out in the snow in the middle of the woods, the snow absorbs the sound, and so it's beyond a quiet that if you know, if you don't, I hope someday you'll have that experience of being in the middle of the woods and snow. But it's kind of like that with a fire, but it's more of an eerie feeling. And then when you go back up there and you start seeing color again, where there is something that you were like, there's no way anything's gonna like ever do this. And it's amazing how Mother Nature is like, yeah, we've been here before, we're gonna do this. And it's just like it no matter what you throw at it. That's why I love the outdoors so much. That's why I live where I live. And then going back up there, and it's crazy to think that something that was so devastating and so tragic can be so beautiful at the same time and stuff. So
Yeah, I know that of which you speak.
Mhm.
and it's one
I'm
of
always
those,
amazed at how resilient trout are. I mean, just
yeah.
just spring runoff. I mean, how do they make it through that? But then you take the pooter that's getting pounded by fires and then floods, and I mean, it makes you wonder, like, why are there even fish there anymore?
Yeah.
Well, David Lance, Cheeseman Canyon got burned about 10 years ago.
Yeah, the Hayman
Wasn't
fire.
that a 2 or 3, 4-year recovery for that one? And I don't think they did anything. You guys
longer.
Mm.
And I
They
think
didn't go
part
in
of it
and-
is because it's a tailwater, like a freestone, one flood that'll scour all that ash out of the bottom of the river, right? But Cheeseman Canyon didn't have that advantage. So yeah, it piled up in the bottom of the water, and it, like Dave said, it choked down a lot of fish, and unfortunately a lot of the bigger, older fish, just couldn't stand the stress of that, so they were gone. So it took years. That fishery was not the same. It used to be one of my go-to spots.
But it's back now. It's been back for the last 3 or 4 years. You guys probably have a better idea than I do.
I mean, that was 90. When was it? 2002? 2002. So it's been a long time, 20 years now, but it took, I would say, at least 10 years for that thing to recover.
So if you got away with that, Dave, in your area, that's awesome. I mean, that's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Testament back to Mother Nature.
Yeah.
I guess that's just kind of one of the inherent risks of enjoying the outdoors, is also, or in that sense, living in a place where you're surrounded by mountains, trees, all of that is, there are the storms, there's the, wildfires, all of these natural disasters that can totally change everything around you, right? Because even you think back to the Boulder flood that came down from Estes Park in 2013, and they claimed it was a 100-year flood, right? But it took out homes along the river. It took out all of these landmarks that people have cherished for ages. And yeah, I guess the best thing you can do is keep good spirits about being in a situation like that. And it's great to hear, Dave, that you still have the cabin, you still have that spot where you created and sustained all those memories too.
Yeah, for me, it's also, I love that comment, but it's recognizing how insignificant we all freaking are,
Right.
Like in the scheme of these things, like we just this, little minuscule blip in time. And so put that in perspective and just understand that, enjoy what you have when you have it, live in the present, be kind to people. Yeah, the woods are tough sometimes. Being outdoors can change on you, and it's okay, right? Just I don't know.
Yeah, it really does.
Waxing philosophic.
Boy, it got a little heavy there, didn't it?
It really
Let's
does.
talk about
It's-
streamers.
All
You
good
guys like
points.
streaming?
All good. All good.
And
I love streaming.
I did. I
and
love
I
it.
love it because it really does. It lets you know just really how small it like your huge world that you think is massive is like really how small of like we really are. Like it's an eye opener, and I mean I don't wish anybody to ever go through it, but man, when you go through it, you're definitely different on the other side. And so I love it.
So
There's
I
something
guess
Oh, go ahead, Lance.
no, by all means, Dave. I was just going to ramble on. Take it away, man.
I was just wondering if there was a story, like a
I
fishing
just spilled
story,
water.
specifically out of your book, Dave, that you maybe would want to share. Not saying read the whole chapter page by page, but is there a story out of your book that stands out to you as like a most memorable fishing moment, whether it was a big fish
Well,
or fish that got
yeah,
away? Or...
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked the question because it's not in the book, but it's actually in the process of the part of the second book. And you had asked some potential questions around dream trip or embarrassing moment, and I said I can kind of combine those things. But I had a 2008. I had a really crazy, wonderful trip to Bolivia. My brother-in-law Peter works for the State Department, USAID, and he's been stationed all over the world. And when he was in La Paz, he said, "Hey, you got to come down. I've met a guy down here. He's one of the preeminent fly fishermen in South America. His name is Dr. Rene Botello. And he's published in fly fishing magazines in the Spanish language. And he's been, in tropical forests. He's fished the flats, saltwater flats, but the lakes and the rivers of the Altiplano in Bolivia. He has told me stories." And Peter said, "You got to come," because I went with him and I caught the biggest fish I've caught. And he had a wonderful picture, beautiful rainbow trout. Like, I'm in, let's figure this out. So I had a 5-day trip to Bolivia and I met Peter. And Dr. Rene had given us some tips about where to go. He could meet us one day, but the first couple of days we were on our own. So we went to some rivers, stayed Sajama National Park. The Mount Sajama is the highest point in Bolivia. We had some great success in some of these chalky looking rivers. It was just, a fascinating thing. It's incredibly remote. We didn't see anybody. We had 2 flat tires and it was sort of a day long, challenge to try to find someone who could help us fix a flat tire. But it was sort of fun. But the real dream piece of this trip, that was also the most embarrassing moment, is when Rene joined us, and we drove up out of La Paz up to El Alto, which is sort of the high plain where the airport is. I think it's the highest elevation of any commercial airport in the world, and it's a very poor area up there, and there's a huge market. So we drove up to from La Paz, which is down in the basin, up to El Alto, and then ultimately out to the Altiplano, in the really in the shadow of the Bolivian Andes. There's a mountain there called El Condoriri, and it's the condor, and it's beautiful. And when we finally got to our destination for the first half of the day, there was a couple lakes, one fairly large lake and one small little mud pond. And out in the distance, this little mud hut made out of llama dung or something, and it's a waft of smoke coming out the chimney. And this family came out. It was Bolivian family, and kids had one shoe on, and one of them was wearing a hat, and the other one's just snotty nose. And how do they live up there? There's just nothing around there. But they were so fascinated when we got to the water and got out of the truck. And so that was kind of cool. They were watching us. And I had already been geared up. And so Renee and Peter were getting rigged up and, tying on tippet and, looking at flies. And Renee was talking about, you guys ought to strip black woolly boogers. That's all you need up here. And I'm like, I'm down. And I was rigged. So I tied one on. I hadn't even put waders on. And we're standing at the edge of this mud pond, because I think we're going to fish the big lake. And I just, a cast, strip, a cast, strip, and all of a sudden slam. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on? And this fish, and the mud pond was clear enough so I could see. There was a very sizable, and I could see the stripe. And I was like, wow, that's a beautiful rainbow trout. But there was this huge mass of moss and algae and whatever the hell grows in Bolivian lakes at 15,000 feet in elevation. And I'm like, how the hell am I going to navigate this fish through this? There's a little tiny channel. I could walk around to the other side of the pond. I mean, it's literally only 40 yards in diameter. And, I'm like kind of freaking out because I'm in front of one of the preeminent fly fishermen in South America. And I've got to show him I know what the hell I'm doing, but I don't. And so Peter says, why don't you get your waders on? I'm like, well, I need some help. I'm holding on to this fish. And so he comes over, and so he's awkwardly trying to pull the waders up on me, and I'm trying to step into them, and I start stepping in the water, and he's cinching them up around my waist. I don't have this stuff strapped over my shoulders. I'm getting deeper in the water so I can get the net and try to get around this morass of moss. And the fish just tangles himself up in this moss, and you can't see him anymore. And so now I put the rod down in the water, just dropped it, grabbed the line, followed the line into the moss. I'm reaching down in thigh deep water. I'm like, where's this fish? I got it. And I found it. I found the fish, and I just pulled him up out of the water. And he's just dripping with this moss hanging off him. And I had the biggest grin on my face. And Peter took a shot of this. It's like this 8-pound rainbow trout.
Woo!
But it was so embarrassing. It was a complete comedy of errors that I have my buddy trying to pull on my waders while I'm holding on to the biggest fish of my life that I didn't know how to play. I felt like such a fool. But it was
fly fishing.
It was. It's just one of those memories that are seared into my mind.
That picture on your feed.
Greatest moments and one of the worst moments at the same time.
Is that picture on your Instagram? I got to look it up. That sounds awesome.
It's not on my Instagram because it's actually, and you know what? In honor of you, Dave Hansen, I'm going to find that picture and post it on Instagram.
Please do.
Yeah.
Gotta love those puddle puppies. They just come crawling out in the most unexpected places. And I swear, some of my biggest fish have come out of super tiny water.
Yeah, you come across. We call it the testing pond. Ryan see me fish there. It's literally just if it was a car, it'd be a shit box. And you look at pretty much the rods, and you're like, man, they're so big. First time I ever went up there, I'm like, there's no way. And I get up there, and no shit, I pull a 10-pound rainbow out of it.
Nice.
And I'm like, what in God's earth did I just find? And so, but it's cool when it's you hit something that you never expected. And I've gone up to high mountain lakes where, I mean, there hasn't been a soul in an area for probably 50 years. And you're out there, and I'm like, yeah, I got to try them here. And chuck it out there, and all of a sudden, these freaking crazy brookies or just chasing your streamer coming across the water. And you're like, holy crap. It's like I'm probably the first person that's ever fly fished up here. And it's just like, I love those areas. I love spots like that.
There's such great surprises. Hey, Dave Hansen,
Yeah.
you can go to November 11th
November
on my
11th.
Instagram
Okay.
at Pure Mountain Living, everyone. And
Right.
there's a picture of Dr. Renee Botello and one of the snotty-nosed kids that came out of the mud hut, who's looking at Dave's fish, or sorry, Renee's fish, and his rainbow, beautiful, gorgeous looking fish, much smaller than the one I caught, of course.
Of course.
But that's the good doctor, and he was a good sport about it. And that's the edge of the mud pond that we were fishing.
You know what I like about that photo? I'm looking at it right now.
Cool.
He doesn't have his rod on his shoulders. He doesn't have his rod in his mouth. He doesn't have his rod on the ground. No, he gave it to the kid. Hey, kid, hold this. I'd like that. That was pretty cool.
That's great.
So, Dave, have you fished in a lot of international places, or was Bolivia just kind of a one-off?
Just kind of a one-off opportunity.
Sounds
just
amazing.
Yeah, but that is something, it's bucket list stuff. I would love to be in, deep South America. I'd love to get up to Alaska. But I'm really a homer. 99% of what I fished in my life is a 1.5-mile strip of the Cache la Poudre River in Colorado. That's just my thing.
30-second walk away, that would be my thing too.
Yeah, like, well, when I'm there, I don't think I need to go anywhere else. I think I found Nirvana.
It's back to that same thing. You own a golf membership. You're not golfing somewhere else. You're golfing at your membership.
Right.
So you're fly fishing the same thing. You got the river. You're not gonna go somewhere else. You're fishing here. So it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so down in Bolivia, was it mostly just rainbows you were targeting on that trip? Rainbows, browns?
That's the only thing we saw.
Gotcha.
And
I'm
again,
always
with
interested.
my limited knowledge, I didn't know what the species were really.
Yeah. It's always interesting just to see what species people target around the world, right? Because rainbow trout have made their way into, 6 out of the 7 continents and almost every fishery that has somewhat clean water. And yeah, I'm always interested to see what folks are pulling out. And oftentimes there's fish that you don't even know about that you can target on a fly too. But knowing that rainbow trout is there is always kind of like that fallback safe keep. You're like, oh, at least I can catch one of those, right? You never know what's going to come out on top of it, but
yeah.
I was gonna say, I just saw a story this week that was saying that browns came from Germany back in 18 something. They were brought over for Germany. They're not native to the United States. But I'm sure I just ruined that, and it's probably there's no truth to it at all.
I mean, it could be.
Well, have any of you
it's
guys
very
ever?
true.
I mean, when I grew up, that was referred to. If we caught a brown, it was called, you caught a German brown.
German brown, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well,
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
And they're just so highly adaptable and so sought after too, right? Because a freshwater fishery that has a pretty reliable and sustainable trout population is not only indicative of like healthy water, but you can also raise trout in that water too. So,
Trout are a pain in the ass to raise. I mean, they really are. It's you got to make sure you got a well oxygenated area. You got to make sure you got what kind of plants are on the bottom. I mean, it's just like we got some stalker ponds that we fish, and just to keep them alive every year, it's high maintenance. I mean, it's just like honestly, I hate to say it, between shitty fishermen that just don't understand the proper handling. And then another big thing is otters, osprey. Osprey are beautiful, but I fucking hate them.
Do you?
Yeah.
Every time I'm seeing it, everybody's shocked when I say, let's shoot it.
Oh, I want to bury.
What? No, look at that bird. No,
Dude, I don't know
that bird
how
eats a
many
shitload of fish.
times I've sat out there fishing, having a great day, and I've had literally osprey probably like 10 feet off the side of me just come down and just donkey punch a fish out of the water.
Yeah.
And take off. And then,
Crazy.
so my ultimate revenge, though, is I love it because I've seen it multiple times. Osprey will come down and get it. They'll be taken off. A bald eagle will come by and smash the osprey, drop it, and usually they're in pairs where we're at. And so it's either the male or female will smash the osprey, they'll drop the fish, and then the other bald eagle will catch the fish in midair and take off with it.
Hmm.
I've seen it like a couple times. I'm like, okay, he got my revenge.
That's
That's
very
a-
cool.
That's a premeditated attack right there.
Yeah.
I tell you.
And so
Well
yeah,
coordinated.
Teamwork, yeah.
and it's pretty awesome when they do it. One of these days, I'm gonna get that on GoPro, and I'd love
That
to
would be
able to
awesome.
get that on video.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I've been pretty blown away by, I spent a little bit of time down in Central America over the past couple of years, and there were even trout in some of the high mountain streams in like Costa Rica, Panama, all of these unexpected places. And they get sizable too. I mean, definitely not, trout out west kind of size, but you can still get into 16, 18-inch trout in the mountains of Costa Rica. And then you catch one, you're like, all right, I'm out of here, man. Bounce down to the beach, go have yourself some beers and watch the sunset, right? Like, best of both worlds right there. It's crazy.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So have there been any fish, that have kind of flipped you the fin, Dave, that you thought were coming in and, things just kind of turned south on you?
I have so many LDRs in my history.
I'm glad someone else knows that terminology. That's a great way to
and
look at life.
I'm not ashamed of that.
Mhm.
I had them on,
Yep.
and that was enough.
There you go. You fooled them for a moment.
Yeah.
The long distance release is nice too when you're fishing big meaty streamers like Gary does all the time. It's just something you don't have to worry about. Pops itself right off, and you don't even have to tell anyone you caught it on a streamer.
Like I said, my tarpon stories. I caught 2 tarpons. I've said this before, and they lasted 17 seconds together. The length of both of them was 17 seconds. But I'm talking about it, aren't I? I caught tarpon.
Yeah.
Did I land them? No. Did I
Right.
bring them in? No.
No.
But I had them on the line.
That's cool.
But I'm going next week. I'm going back down to Florida next week. Looking forward to it.
Oh, cool.
Right on.
Yeah.
Going out for tarpon again or snook, or what are you going for?
Yeah, tarpon.
You're gonna try to get your
Yellow jacks, and
you're gonna try to
red
chase a-
snapper, yellow
Go
snapper.
chase
What's
group,
that?
Go chase a group, or they opened up tags for him.
I won't chase him, but if he hits it, it's not my fault.
I think what this is the first year.
I can't keep
grouper-
him, but I don't want to.
Yeah, I think this is the first year grouper's been eligible to chase openly, and I don't know if you can keep them, but I guess I heard they taste good.
Yeah, I think they're.
But
really
I
good
mean, you're
eating.
getting like, I don't know if there's like a size limit, because I mean, I know guys down there that have caught like 600-700 pound freaking groupers,
Mhm.
which would be insane.
I hire a guide every year, same guy out of Marathon. I'm gonna go back to him next week. I'll ask him. So we'll see
That'd be
what
fun.
the word is.
Go tell them you want to
Yeah.
hand line one.
Yeah.
No,
It's an option. That'd
it's
be
an option.
awesome.
No, thank you.
We'll
So
all come
stripping,
with
don't
you
want to
to
do that
help-
one.
Yeah. it's bring
What's
the
that,
kid-
Lance?
I was just saying, we'll all come down with you just to help hand line one in. You're
Yeah.
gonna need quite the crew for that.
Gonna need exactly. Who's not
Yeah.
pulling in the back? Looking
There
over
you
your
go.
shoulder. Pull.
Dave, you give us some time up at your cabin in the Pooter Canyon, and we'll take you hand lining for grouper down in Florida. How about that? It's a pretty fair trade.
There's a trade
Ah,
for you.
Oh, we could do that.
Seems right.
Yeah.
We might even write a chapter of your next book.
We
Yeah,
might
there
be
you
a
go.
chapter in your
Trip.
next book.
Yeah, I can tell spending time with any of you guys is there would be a lot of fodder for some good stories, no question.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a nice way of putting it. Thank you very much.
Very polite.
Very polite.
Dave, where can people find your book?
You can find it on Amazon.com. Search Sermons and Stones. There's a couple of titles. There's Sermons in Stone about some stone walls in New England or the UK or something. But Sermons and Stones, Tales of Family, Friends, and Fly Fishing. Appreciate all the support. Glad that those of you who are reading it are enjoying it. It was a fun project, and I'm continue to be inspired to do a little bit more.
For sure. And for everybody that's listening and watching, we will have a link in the description to the book, and so you guys can click on that and go give them some
Oh,
love.
that's great. Thanks for doing that, guys.
Yeah, it's a great book. Highly encourage anyone that enjoys the outdoors or fishing or just give it a read. I mean, short stories is right up my alley. Being the toilet book you described earlier, that's, always comes in handy.
Home away from home. I love it.
Yeah, I didn't do myself any favors with that description, did I?
Not in this room, you didn't.
Toilet book? What the hell is that guy talking about? So I don't know if you guys are ready to close this thing, but I just want to share, if we're going to close, you tell me when, just a quick passage from the book, because for me, this is really what brings it home. There's a story in the book called The Bend, and there's a place I go, which is really right on the border of what's private land, my uncle's, and public access. But it's the place we go. It's far enough from a parking spot that you don't see very many people there. It does get fish, but that's where I grew up as a boy fishing, first throwing Mep spinners and Panther Martins, and then my Royal Coachman. And it continues to be a nice little place to catch a lot of fish. But there was a point where it was all about catching fish. And I write this in the story. It was all about bringing friends down, see what I can do. I'm a fucking good fly fisherman. Kind of thing. It was braggadocious and, just full of myself, just ego out the wazoo. And so as I end this story, this is really for me what it means to be outdoors, to be on the water, and how I've evolved. And the last paragraph of the story, The Bend, is I have evolved from a fisherman to a naturalist, from someone whose mission it was to bring home a full creel, to someone whose desire it is to simply describe the single trout I may have danced with that day. I go there now because I'm grateful for the solitude. I go there to experience the changing light and changing seasons. I go there to evoke the wonder and fascination of my childhood. I go there because I will inevitably see an otter, a moose, or a merganser winging low over the water around the turn of the bend. I go there to remind myself of the transitory nature of living things. I no longer go to the river to fish. I fish to go to the river. Thanks for letting me share that.
Absolutely.
It's tremendous.
Epic.
It's nice.
Thanks for sharing with us too, Dave. And I mean, really, our entire discussion today has been damn near poetic. It's been awesome to sit down with you. It's been great to hear about your stories, get a little behind the scenes of the book and your personal life. We're just super appreciative that you had time to join us on the Set You Free Outdoors podcast. This has been Dave Ammons of Pure Mountain Living. Dave, thanks again.
Thanks, Dave.
Appreciate all of you. Thanks very much for having me.